Well, thanks so much for tuning in tonight to another Thursday night live stream with our new series we're doing called TLS Table Talks. Tonight is really awesome. I'm here with Aaron Goodman and Heather Brown, and we're going to talk tonight about what it looks like for people who accept Jesus a little bit later in life and those transformation stories, what their life was like before Jesus and then after. And so tonight's going to be really awesome. We've already been laughing and stuff before we even started, so I think that they're going to have a lot to say, and it's going to be really fun. So I hope you guys enjoy. And with that, we're going to get started, guys, okay? All right, so my first question for you guys is, how did you meet Jesus? What was your transformation story like? You know, how did you come to know Jesus? How did you get saved? Tell us just about those few minutes in time when you met Jesus for the first time.
I would say it's when my fiance and I decided to start looking for a church, and we found the Living Stone. Didn't really have much intention of this becoming something that we did every Sunday, just kind of out of curiosity, and just felt a pull to go. And then at the end of the service, Keith, asked if anyone wants to put their yes on the table, and I just really felt like I needed to do it. And so just right there, my first time going to church, I accepted.
That's really awesome. Yeah. What about you, Heather?
Mine was several years ago, I was probably 24 or so, and I was going through some stuff with my family and talking to Luke about it. We started talking about forgiveness and what that actually means in his Christian faith that he followed, and he kind of just walked me through being saved. It was really emotional. It was really cool for both of us. But then we didn't really do anything with that for many years. It wasn't until last year that I kind of felt the need to start just going to Bible study, I guess, with Sherry. Sherry was inviting me. She has kids in my kids' classes, and she started inviting me to Bible studies, and that's, I guess, when I felt more of a transformation start. But I guess ultimately it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think for people like me, we were talking earlier, my story is a lot different because I grew up in the culture of Christianity. So Jesus was always a thing from very early on for me. But for you guys, your story is a little bit different. And so what drew you to Christianity? Out of everything else that's out there in the world, because there's a lot of different stuff, what drew you to Christianity? What made you want to go looking for a church, and what made you want to kind of be involved in like what Luke grew up with, and what made you decide that like Christianity was something that you needed to pursue?
I would say for me, I have a lot of friends who are Christians, and there's just this overflowing joy and love for other people, and I just sort of assumed it was maybe their personality, right? And then I meet more people who are this way and realize they all have something else in common too, and it's Christianity. And so at that point I was just wanted to know more about it, and that's kind of when I started zigzagging my way to church.
Well, I mean, being married to Christians, fairly easy answer. My parents were, Lutheran and Methodist, and it wasn't something that I didn't know about growing up. Like I knew about God. I guess I didn't really know about the Bible. So I don't know. It wasn't necessarily a choice, like a conscious choice to pick Christianity. It just, I guess it kind of was always there for me. It was, I don't know.
Another part of Christianity too is, you have to, I think for everybody, when we really accept Jesus and we surrender that, we have to recognize within ourselves that there's something missing. I think for people like me, it's a little bit harder to pinpoint that right away because, like, once again, I grew up with it. Like, I was told from day one that something was missing. So for people maybe like you guys who have to figure out that there's something missing, like, how was that process? How did you figure out that there was something missing inside of you? Was it because you saw what other people had and you didn't have that? Or, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what made you realize that you needed Jesus?
I'd say trial and error. That wasn't the first thought that came to mind. It was, comparing myself to the friends that I had who were Christians and thinking, oh, well, I'm kind and I show love to others and I'm a pretty good person most days. So that makes me like them, and so, or maybe they're so joyful all the time because they live this perfect life and don't have to worry about anything. Of course, that's not true for anyone. And so seeing them, go through difficult times in life and still be hopeful and joyful and still loving others and all of those things, it was pretty eye-opening for me, because I'm not that way when I'm going through something difficult in life. So it was just kind of trial and error with that. Yeah.
For me, it's probably that after my third little boy was born, my third kid was born. I don't have 3 boys. I had a really hard time. Luke was working nights, and I was alone a lot with 3 kids, and they were young, and I was going through some really dark stuff, and I felt really alone. And so
It's okay if you cry. It's totally okay.
It was just at a time where I just needed something, and I didn't really know what that was. Friendship was probably a big one. And even just the Bible studies of like, hey, you can just come and hang out with other adults. Your kids can kind of be close. It's childcare. And for me, it was like, okay, well, whatever. I'll go talk about the Bible as long as I get to not be home alone on a Wednesday night. And then it was through just conversation and just growing close to these people, and getting a sense of what real Christianity is, the kindness and the not judgment, and that is, I guess, what really drew me in deeper.
Did you guys know much about Christianity before all of this? You had mentioned, you've noticed the way that your friends would act, or, you were married to a Christian, but you mentioned that you didn't even know the Bible. So did you know much about really who Jesus was, who he claimed to be, the Bible? Did you know really anything about that at all?
I didn't. No. Mm-mm.
I knew enough to have opinions. I knew all the shouldn'ts that, those good Christians would lay on you. All the shoulds that you should be doing and you shouldn't be doing this. I knew enough to know that it wasn't really something that it didn't seem kind, it didn't seem good. Like, why would you put so many restrictions for somebody that's supposed to be so loving? It was very restrictive, and it was very, like, that's what I knew, was just the rules almost. It was something that really just was off-putting to me for a really long time.
Yeah. So after, having spent some time now, digging into the Bible, understanding more, having more knowledge, how has that shifted your perspective of what you know about Christianity now? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. One thing that really stuck with me was that you don't have to clean up to come to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that. That was something that I thought that you needed to be this perfect person and follow all the rules mm-hmm. before Jesus accepted you. And that's not true. And so that really just opened up a lot for me, and learning that it's about having a relationship with Jesus. And I loved that this is not something that really happens all at once. Just like any relationship, it's something that grows with time, and you get out of it what you put into it. So
I forgot your question.
That's okay. It's totally okay. Just, talking about how you didn't know much, or you had these preconceived ideas.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So how did that shift once you began to really dive into scripture and who God is?
For me, that was a really cool thing. I started doing Bible studies. I did my first last fall after our women's retreat, which was super emotional. I was still holding on to so many fears, and just it was kind of a scary time. But we came back and we started the Seamless Bible Study. That's where you started.
Mm-hmm.
And just actually learning like the science of the Bible, and knowing that like this isn't just a bunch of rules, and like Aaron said, you don't have to clean up. Like nobody came and cleaned up for God first. He accepted you as you were, and then the transformation happened. And just that like really just resonated with me. But just learning so much about the Bible, and being able to then form my own thoughts and feelings and opinions, not based on what other people were saying, but actually reading the book and reading the word. And that for me is what really changed for me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think has, I'm trying to think about how I phrase this question so that it makes sense, but what do you think helps kind of fuel your understanding of the things that you're reading and your deeper relationship with Jesus? Because I think that it can be really daunting at first, to dive into something as old as the Bible. There's a lot of cultural context, there's a lot of historical context, and then beginning to understand who God is, like that can be a lot and very overwhelming, especially at first. And so what are some of the things that have helped you kind of make sense of this whole life and who God is, and help kind of make that process easier?
I think picking the right version of the Bible is so important, because just, you even today I was looking at a verse and I went and switched to the King James Version, and it is like reading Shakespeare. It is completely different. It's so confusing, but you can read the same thing in the NLT version, and it just makes more sense. So for me, that was a huge help.
Mm-hmm.
And also having people around you that you can ask the questions, or you can talk through things, and that they'll have the patience with you to explain, and not think like, oh my gosh, how do you not know that? Or maybe that they even get excited that you're growing.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I would say community is a big part of that, and just finding a group of people who are maybe a step ahead of you in their knowledge, and who you're comfortable just being vulnerable with and honest. Like, hey, I'm new to this. I don't really, I don't know the Bible. I haven't spent a lot of time in God's Word, but having that community there to walk you through it and guide you and answer questions, it's fun, and it really helps make sense of God's Word.
Yeah, and kind of going along with that, you guys lived in such a tangible world for so long. And what I mean by that is like, you operated on what you could see, what you could touch, what you could feel. And then moving to an intangible world where we literally have faith in something that we cannot see. How was that process? Was it difficult or easy for you to kind of make that transition from something so materialistic to something that you can't really engage with on a physical realm? Was that hard for you guys?
It's still hard. It's still, I feel like I'm constantly battling these two identities, and one's telling me like, what you're saying, what you're feeling is so fake. That's not what you felt 3 years ago. Those aren't the things. How can you be real? How, who these people are, they're going to judge you. They're going to think that you're just making this up, or they're going to think you're so weird and crazy. And then, you just can stop and pray, and all of it goes away. And it's like, it's just this inner feeling that you can't explain it, but it fills you to your fingertips and your toes, and you just know that there's something else.
Yeah. Before I started seeking out a church, I asked my friends some tough questions like that. I'm like, how do you know God's real though? And they would tell me that, Well, because he's how I get through all the difficult times in life that we're all going to have, and what gives me hope and peace. And I see him working in my life and changing my life. And so it's like, okay. And now I'm there, and it is hard to grasp. Something that I prayed about a lot in the beginning was just, God, please present yourself to me. I wanna believe in you. I wanna know that you're here. I wanna feel it. And time again, he did. So
that's really awesome. I'm like smiling because I just think it's so cool. Like, it's so cool, you know. I think for like even myself, who's been in the faith for a long time, like you can get those moments of doubt too, like where you're like, God, are you really there? You know, it really is hard to fight against the natural desire to have a physical relationship and a touch with something. But then hearing like your stories and stuff, like I'm just kind of like overwhelmed and emotional about it, because like it's like we're all in the same boat. Like, you know what I mean? God has touched all of us in different ways, but we're all here together. And there's that unity in God and that experience of really understanding what it's like to know him. And so that's really cool, because it like washes out any doubt, because either we're all crazy, which could potentially also be a thing, or God is real, you know, and we're just 3 people, and there's thousands and millions of people around the world who are in the same exact boat as us, you know?
Yeah. So when I shared my testimony video on Facebook, I was terrified. I thought I was going to get so much backlash, negativity, and it was completely the opposite. I got so much love and just positive feedback from people I haven't talked to since high school. You know, they were all just so caring and just kind, and it was just really cool to just be able to see that you still have a group of people that maybe you didn't realize was there before, even if you do lose people.
Yeah, and like looking at, you know, your lives before and after Christ, you know, you have two identities, you know? And so what was that transition like in the process of becoming more like Jesus and knowing Jesus, you know, before and after? Like, what have you lost in that process? What have you had to sacrifice? But also, what have you been able to gain with this new life and this new identity?
I think for me, I lost a lot of humility. You have to kind of go back and eat your words, eat your opinions, you know, things that you have said and things that you've thought, they change, and you have to kind of accept that and deal with that. I've lost some friendships, you know, they're just different now. I'm hoping that one day, you know, I can come back, or we can come back to each other. And they'll see that I'm not different. I'm not as different, you know, or I'm just better. I'm, you know,
Heather 2.0.
Yeah. And what I've gained though is just a whole, like a family of believers, and, you know, the church, all you guys, and, just, you know, less judgment, I guess. I don't know if you can gain less judgment, but I think maybe you can.
I would say for me, a big change that I've noticed is just this constant peace, and knowing that God's with me in whatever I go through. And
like, well, talking to, you mentioned earlier, like even before we started filming, talking about these 2 different identities that you wrestle with, you know, like how is that? How have you been able to maneuver that, you know, the old Erin versus the new Erin?
Yeah, so I guess I find myself sometimes acting one way around this group of people and in a different way. You know, my old self is still present around this group of people. And, you know, I just kind of give myself some grace there, because it's not a change that happens overnight. It's a relationship with God that grows. And as my identity in Christ gets stronger, then I'll no longer have to wrestle with those 2 identities.
What are some of the positive effects that you've seen? You know, you mentioned community with other fellow believers and stuff, but like even just in your perception of yourself and like who you are and your purpose in this life, like, you know, what are some of the things that maybe you have gained in that, you know, in that relationship with Jesus? Do you think of yourself more positively? Do you find life more enjoyable? Like how has your thought life shifted too in response to just, you know, why we're here and why we exist and what the point of it all is?
I definitely see life through a different lens now, and have more thoughts of love and kindness and forgiveness to others, and always looking for ways to show that light to others.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite that easy for me. I struggle. I am in my head a lot, and I am, you know, always going back and forth of, you know, gosh, you're just not being, are you being the real you? Is this real? Is this not? I don't know. I try to come back to praying, and I usually get there, but
it's hard in the moment.
It is hard. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How does Jesus help cope with all of that, you know? You mentioned before, like, all of this, you felt so alone, you know? Like, having Jesus, has that at least changed the way that you process through those tough times?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has. You know, I keep being reminded of the story about the woman and the well, that when Jesus comes to the well. And it just seems like this last 2 weeks, I guess, has probably been there. And it's, you know, you can go to him to be filled up. And that for me has been a shift. Whereas before I would probably just kind of, I don't know, wallow. And even just going to other believers and going to, you know, people, and they can pray for you, and you can share that, and they can remind you, you know, of God's love. And it does help.
Okay, so summarizing, you know, your stories of before and after Jesus, how would you encourage other believers to communicate with people who don't believe in Jesus? How would you love them and, you know, talk to them, encourage them, interact with them?
I think the most important thing would probably be to just meet them where they're at, you know, leave the judgment at the door. You know, I'm reminded of the story about Jesus meeting the woman at the well again, where he let the woman drink first before he sent her off. And that's so important to just love them, you know, stop with all the shouldn'ts and shoulds and all the rules, you know, and just love them, just accept them and drop the judgment.
Yeah, I would say meeting people where they're at is really important. When I first went to the Livingstone Church, I felt so awkward and out of place, and I was really afraid that people would judge me and think that I didn't belong there, but that wasn't it at all. It meant everything that they did meet me where I was at. You know, I'm a new believer, and they were excited about it. And that's what I think that we should do, is to love and forgive and show excitement to others, and just meet them where they're at and show them what it means to be a Christian rather than tell them.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your stories today. And I know that other people will be encouraged, even through all of this, you know, that they'll be encouraged with your stories and how God has obviously worked in both of your lives pretty tremendously. So thank you for being vulnerable and patient and transparent and all of those things as we kind of like waded through today. And for those of you who are watching, I hope that you're also encouraged, and we'll see you same time next week.